with acronyms, the individuals who spoke on behalf of those groups during the course of that high-pressure, high-intensity interview with Faisal Islam. And both Jonathan and Julia have been gracious enough to acknowledge that I wasn't talking about every expert. I wasn't talking about physicists, doctors, engineers, mechanics. I was talking specifically about economists and those who speak for particular organisations. Organisations like the OECD, the IMF, the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of England, and the CBI. And during the course of the referendum, the OECD said Britons will be paying a heavy Brexit tax for many years if the UK leaves the EU. A UK exit from the EU, the OECD said, would immediately hit confidence and raise uncertainty, which would result in GDP being lower. Then, on Wednesday, the 21st of September, Larry Elliott of The Guardian reported, the OECD, the West's leading economic think tank, has backtracked on its warning that the UK would suffer instant damage from a Brexit vote and thrown its weight behind plans by Theresa May. Of course, the OECD wasn't alone. The IMF also got it wrong, and it was reported in The Telegraph by Ambrose Evans-Pritchard on the 29th of July 2016. The International Monetary Fund's top staff misled their own board, made a series of calamitous misjudgments in Greece, became euphoric cheerleaders for the Euro project, ignored warning signs of impending crisis, and collectively failed to grasp an elemental concept of currency theory. And as it went with both of those, so it went with prominent figures who'd been on the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of England, like Professor Danny Blanchflower. Professor Blanchflower famously said before 2010 that George Osborne's economic policies would result in 5 million people being unemployed. That never materialized. And in fact, at every turn, when Professor Blanchflower was predicting either increased unemployment or a slowdown in wage growth, precisely the opposite happened. Professor Blanchflower was also, of course, a critic of leaving the European Union and argued that Theresa May, when she unveiled what he deemed her hard Brexit approach in a speech at Lancaster House, that Theresa would signal to the markets a determination to pursue a Brexit that would lead sterling to fall. Sterling, of course, responded to Professor Blanchflower by rising, the fastest rise in any single day, I think for several years, as a result of, as a result of his tweet, I suspect. It's also the case that the CBI, an organisation which speaks for British industry and which has many great people working for it, has again been consistently wrong. Because it, like all of these other organisations, not only said that Brexit would lead to an economic hit almost immediately, the decision to leave the European Union was taken almost immediately after the referendum result. The CBI, like all these other organisations, and this was my point in the campaign, had said that Britain being outside the single currency would be a bad thing and would lead to economic calamity. And they pointed out, quite rightly, that if you're outside a single currency area, your business has to pay costs, face uncertainties, hedge in order to deal with currency risk. All of those things are true. But it was also the case that being outside the single currency meant that Britain's economy was saved from the tragedy inflicted on those countries that did join the single currency: Greece, Spain, Portugal, Ireland, and others. And the same thing, of course, applies now. It is the case that leaving the European Union necessarily involves perhaps some additional friction, perhaps some new questions which some would say pose an uncertain future for our country. But it is also the case that by taking back control, we're able, as we were when we were outside the single currency, to pull levers that can drive our economy forward faster and over any bumps in the road more effectively than if we'd given up and continued to yield control to others. Now, one of the reasons why I mention these organisations and these individuals who've got things wrong is because during the course of the referendum campaign, and Jonathan's right, often in politics, people quote an expert from a world-beating organisation as a way of closing the argument down, playing the ace of trumps. Olivier Blanchard, the chief economist of the IMF, says this. So you must be wrong, Michael Gove, with your 2-1 in English. What do you know? But actually, what we found is that sometimes very, very distinguished people, Olivier Blanchard knows far more about economics than I do, get it wrong. Because they are, as the IMF's own body pointed out, often in the grip of a particular example of either groupthink or intellectual vanity or plain error. And Jonathan is right that we should not take the predictions of economists as though they were hard scientific facts which rank with a physicist being able to tell you what the reaction will be to any particular action. The truth is that economics can sometimes be a useful way of understanding human behavior and making political decisions. Of course it can. But it is wrong to try to close down any debate by saying this expert takes a particular view and this expert trumps the wisdom of others, including the wisdom of crowds. Because if we believed that an expert judgment should automatically trump the judgment of all of us, then why have a democracy in the first place? Indeed, there are some academics who've called for what they call an epistocracy. They want those with knowledge to be able to take decisions. Well, I think that would be tragic. I think that would be the mistake that Plato argued for in the past, a mistake that would lead, unfortunately, to error after error, because technocrats, when they have been given the chance to shape policy free from democratic pressure, have made mistake after mistake, the single currency being one of the most momentous.